So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Cheated Hinata? So let's start the series. The Akugan shouted Hinata as the veins around her eyes narrowed, allowing her to see everything clearly. Her palms were facing her opponent as she prepared for their attack, and Neji simply glared with his veined eyes and launched his attack. She was able to block multiple times and counter once, but her counter missed, and Neji struck her hard at her torso. She fell to the ground but quickly got back up, waiting for his attack again in her fighting stance, breathing a little hard. Neji began again and struck her several times. Hinata could see the blows coming, but many were unavoidable for her. She was struck at her torso once more, along with a sharp blow to her collarbone and one to her jaw, and she could taste the coppery flavor of blood. He turned coolly and walked back into the house from the courtyard, saying, "You're done, that's all today." Hinata was too shy to protest, but she wiped the blood off her lip and gently massaged her collarbone, which hurt but wasn't as much as the fact that Neji ended their training early. "I want to get tougher, that way I can be stronger when I'm around, Naruto-kun." She blushed just thinking about him. Hinata got herself up and strolled about the hamlet, thinking softly, "I wonder what Naruto-kun is doing." There seemed to be a couple everywhere Hinata looked. She saw Shikamaru and Tenmari walking down the street, probably discussing one of their missions. They looked kind of nice together, but I doubt either of them knew. She also passed Tenten eating barbecue pork with Lee, and I assumed she liked Neji and Ai-san. Hinata must have stepped on one of the flowers when she witnessed Ino and Choji fighting over them. Hinata's face frowned slightly as her head dipped. "Whenever I get stronger I'm going to talk to Naruto-kun, without freaking out, or passing out, or running away," she said. She also noticed that Shino was gathering bugs in the forest and that Kakashi was reading his dirty book on a rooftop. Although she couldn't find Kiba or Akamaru, it was likely that they were running through the forest. "I'm so weak-willed," she sighed. Someone shouted, "Naruto! You get back here," from a distance. Hinata was knocked down by an orange flash that struck her as she looked up. The pain initially came from her head, and she didn't open her eyes until the throbbing ceased, but when she did, she gasped in shock. "Hinata? What are you doing in the middle of the street? Aren't you training with Neji?" she asked, her face turning a deep pink as Naruto passed her with a bewildered expression on his face, inches from hers. Hinata bit her lip in nervousness and it started to bleed again. Hinata was unable to make a single syllable. "He's right on top of me. I can feel Naruto-kun's breath because he's so close." It had a ramen-like smell, and although she wanted to move, she refrained from doing so, freezing up without making any movement. He said, "Hinata? Did you know your lip is bleeding?" and then proceeded to wipe it off with his thumb. She felt her face heat up, but Naruto didn't seem to notice. He sucked on his thumb without thinking twice to remove the blood from his hand, and he gave her a silly smile. She felt the weight leave her and her vision cleared. An irate Sakura yelled, "Naruto!" She shook him by his collar and continued to yell, saying something like, "I can't believe he'd tried that, and he should be lucky to be alive." Hinata picked herself up just as Sakura threw him to the ground and ran away, but she turned to face him and saw that he had punched him in the face. His cheek was swollen, but he still smiled, and she thought she had calmed her nerves, but she felt weak at his smile. "Are you alright, and Naruto-kun?" she stammered, trying not to reveal herself by looking at his face. He got up and brushed his clothing off, then he smiled at her. "Yeah, I'm alright, Sakura-chan would never seriously hurt me," he insisted. She managed to inquire, fidgeting with the hem of her coat, "What did you do to upset Sakura-san? I hope he doesn't think I'm being intrusive." He groaned and scratched the back of his head, gazing away from her and into the direction Sakura had stormed off in. His expression was a little disoriented. I tried to steal a kiss from Sakura-chan, he said. Oh, was all Hinata could say as she lowered her head after feeling a sharp pain in her stomach that wasn't related to her earlier fight with Niji. Of course, Naruto is in love with Sakura. It's foolish of me to think that he'd want someone as meek as me when there's someone as spirited as Sakura-san for him. Naruto's face was grave as he gazed toward the Hokage Tower, where Sakura worked alongside Tsunade V. But Hinata heard a hint of pain in his voice. Sakura-chan loves someone else. She'll never have room in her heart for me other than as her friend. She could never like me the way she likes him. Sakura dislikes Naruto-kun, then? Does that imply that Naruto-kun could notice me if I put in more effort? Perhaps there is still hope for me? She turned to face Naruto, who was standing there thinking. Observing his sore cheek, she considered offering to apply anything to it. Well, see you later, Hinata. Tell Niji that despite her considerable nervousness, Hinata bravely interrupted him, saying, Naruto-kun? Your cheek is swollen, she said without faltering. Ha? Oh, well, I'll put something on it later. She took out a little jar and opened it, saying, I could put something on it. Really, it's no big deal, Hinata, I can She genuinely shocked herself when she exclaimed, I want to do it, louder than she had planned. After saying fine, Naruto remained silent. They then went to the Ichiraku ramen shop and sat down. Hinata sat down closest to his cheek, not realizing that he was much taller than she had remembered, but then again, it had been a long time since she had truly gotten this close to him. She stared at him for a long time before he finally said something to startle her out of her reverie. She stifled a gasp and applied some ointment to the tips of her hand after he asked, Can't reach? Naruto's eyes were closed, which made it easier to be close to his face. It's difficult to not get anxious when he looks at me. She applied some of the ointment to his cheek while she could feel his skin, and she shuddered inside that she was actually touching Naruto without fainting. She brushed his blonde hair as she withdrew from his face. Before Naruto could thank her, Hinata got up from the bench and hurried away. I am done, she said again, stuttering around him as she closed the container. I think I should leave. Naruto-kun makes me too nervous to hang around here. What was that about? He asked himself. He ordered a big bowl of beef ramen and devoured it quickly. Before long, he had consumed 2 servings and was paying for them. The owner of the ramen shop inquired, What about the girl you were with earlier? Wasn't she your date? No, she's just a friend I knew from the Ninja Academy, was Naruto's emotionless reply. Really? I thought she actually liked you. If you weren't so dense you'd have noticed. It was kind of obvious. As he was ready to leave, Naruto put away his frog bag and returned the elderly man the bowls he had eaten from. His curiosity overcame him, and he leaned on the counter and inquired, What gave you the idea that she liked me? The man pointed with chopsticks at the seat next to Naruto, but he didn't say anything. He looked over and noticed something he hadn't noticed before. The container for the ointment she had applied to him was in the very center of the seat. She hadn't forgotten it, she had purposefully left it there. At that moment, Naruto realized that every time Hinata had approached him, she had always seemed nervous. I assumed that she was just shy and had trouble talking to people, not just me. Perhaps the old man was right. He picked up the ointment and placed it in his pocket before leaving the store for home. If that's the case, then she's liked me for a long time. I wonder why I never noticed. Unaware that he was grinning, he pulled the container from his pocket and examined it. I'm kind of relieved Sakura punched me today because otherwise, I might not have learned about Hinata. Back at the Hyuga residence, Hinata was lying down in her bed, wrapped in a blanket, and she had a big smile on her face. I helped Naruto-kun today, and I discovered that Sakura-san doesn't like him like that. I should feel ashamed of myself, but for some reason, I feel like I've been given another chance to get Naruto to notice me. Thank you, Sakura-san, for punching him today. With that, Hinata fell asleep, still smiling broadly. The morning was quiet and unnoticed until the sun shone through Hinata's window. Her eyes fluttered open and she shielded them to adjust to the light. It wasn't until she was sitting up with her feet on the floor that the events of the previous day passed before her. Her face heated up quickly and she almost passed out on the floor. Daybreak crept into the building slowly, like a mouse sneaking through a house while the cat is sleeping. With both hands covering her face to conceal her humiliation, she exclaimed to herself, "I raised my voice to Naruto-kun. When did I become so bold?" Then she recalled that she had also touched his face with her hand. She gazed at it in surprise. Hinata grinned as she realized that his face was so near to hers and that she had unintentionally touched his hair as well. "I think I feel a little stronger already," she said softly. "I'm going to work really hard to become stronger for Naruto-kun. I won't be beat as bad as I was yesterday." She recalled that she had taken a lot of blows from her cousin yesterday, and that I had suffered a lot of damage, including a bloody lip. Then she suddenly remembered how Naruto had touched her lips to wipe away the blood, which sent her face into a frenzy as she dozed on the ground with a dizzy and joyful expression. When Naruto woke up to the sound of birds chirping, he sat up, stretched his arms above his head, and yawned. He looked in a mirror and saw that the swelling had decreased, but the injury was still visible. Naruto took off his sleeping cap and tossed it onto the bed. After changing, he felt something in his pocket and realized that it was for swelling and bruises. To apply the remainder to his face, he removed it and opened it. How did she accomplish that? I take it that she placed it on the tips of her fingers? When he finished, the container was empty, and Naruto was a little upset that he didn't have any more. He assumed he must have used too much and wasted it, and he blinked in understanding. He had attempted to do it the way she had, but he had failed. She had been softer. He hurried out the door, slamming it so forcefully behind him that his calendar fell off the wall, exclaiming, "Hey! Now I have a reason to stop by." Niji threw a shuriken and a kunai at his cousin, precisely aiming them at her important areas. She exclaimed, "Shugohaku Rokujuyan Sho," as she spun swiftly, knocking many of the targets away from her and a few at Niji himself. He leaned back while two of the projectiles came straight for his face, and one of them passed overhead without touching him. As he straightened up, he noticed that she was having trouble standing. He remarked, "You're done," with the same coldness in his voice as the previous day. "That's all she gasped. "No." Niji was a little taken aback, but he kept it to himself. Usually, she gives up when I tell her she's finished, but now she wants to continue even though it's clear she's finished. As a matter of fact, Niji said, "You have done that technique 36 times consecutively, you have reached your limit," in a tone that was more authoritative than previously. She screamed out, "What about Juken?" "I can still fight," as her breathing stabilized once more. Her eyes were resolute. "I haven't seen her like this since the Chunin exam." She persisted even when she was sure she would lose. "Humph," he said as he sprinted closer and they started sparring. Niji was paying so much attention to her blows that he failed to catch her foot in time when it kicked at his face. He countered numerous times, but she always stopped his fist from connecting. Niji was so skilled that he avoided most of the kick, though part of her sandal cut his cheek. He had forgotten her hands in the process, and one was coming in for a blow to his face, just like he had done to her the day before. Niji swiftly ducked down and used both palms to push her torso with an intense chakra-filled strike, sending Hinata flying across the courtyard and landing hard on her back. "That's enough, you're done today," Niji said, reaching up to wipe the cut on his face, which had already stopped bleeding. Hinata tried to stand but was only able to sit up, and before she could respond, he exited the building. "Yes, Nisan," Hinata said, pausing to think about what she had just done. "I got him. I actually kicked him in the face, missing most of the time, but he was still cut. Does that imply that I'm improving?" She smiled with pride. Perhaps a servant was close by, so Hinata mustered the fortitude to get up and face the woman. "Hinata-sama, yes?" Hinata pushed her bangs aside and brushed off her jacket. "There is someone at the front." Hinata began to run after her cousin, but the woman stopped her. "For Nisan? I'll go get him," she said. "Who would come here for me?" The woman said, "Hinata-sama, it's for you," with her head lowered. "We might be on a mission with Kiba-kun and Shino-kun." Even though her joints hurt, Hinata rushed to the entrance to tell them that she had hit Niji, well, nearly hit him, because she felt so strong today that she could climb a mountain and that a mission would be ideal at this point. She opened the sliding door in anticipation of her team but instead saw Naruto smiling, and she immediately fell in the entryway. "Naruto-kun," she exclaimed in shock as she grabbed the doorway's edge to steady herself. She considered a number of reasons for his visit, most of which involved conversing with Niji or playing a game with her cousin, but she was unable to come up with a single one. As he handed her the small container she had left at the ramen shop, he grinned and said, "Hey, I came by to give this back to you." I wasn't sure he would notice, but I was hoping he would, but I didn't think he really would. Naruto placed it in her shaking hands, and she dropped it. Both of them went down to pick it up, but they ended up hitting each other in the head repeatedly. Naruto laughed at their awkwardness. Once more, Hinata was unable to form words before speaking. I'm sorry. I didn't, it's she said, looking down at the container on the ground and picking it up hastily. It felt light, and when she opened it, she saw it was empty. Had he used it? "Thanks, I couldn't put it on the way you did, so I may have wasted some of it," he said, scratching his head. "She seems really anxious, but I'm not sure if she likes me or not. She might just be timid, though. I wonder if there's a way to find out without asking her." She said, "I thought your cheek might still be in pain, so I left the ointment there," as she began to gather her thoughts. "He's just being kind by returning it," she said, fiddling with the jar without looking up. "Naruto would do that for anyone." "I'm glad you did. It's healing great thanks to you. I owe you, Hinata," he said with a silly smile before placing a hand on her head and patting her. "I believe I would be content if I died now." Hinata's face was a deep scarlet, and she did all in her power to avoid looking up into his blue eyes. If she did, she would most likely die. "Don't get too excited, it was only a friendly gesture, and he would do that for anyone, right?" Knowing full well that she might ask for nothing if she's just shy, or ask for a date if she liked him, Naruto asked, "Is there any way I could pay you back?" However, Hinata swallowed the lump in her throat, and Naruto realized that his question was a poor way to find out her intentions. "What am I supposed to ask for?" She kept her face down so she could talk, but she became aware that she was shaking with nervousness. She said, "I would like T2." But her words drifted off, and Naruto was unable to fully comprehend them. He leaned in, hoping she would repeat herself. When she opened her eyes and saw that he was near her face, she jumped. He wasn't trying to be impolite, but he always seemed to be too close to people's faces. She found the courage to speak while staring down into his bright blue eyes. He knelt down so he could see her face. Her eyes were closed and she didn't realize he was looking up at her. "What's that?" "Say that again," she asked. The woman whispered, I would like tea to watch you train as sometime, Naruto-kun, and I did. Naruto and I had a conversation without fleeing. What did I say now? Did I say that correctly? She's much cuter than I imagined. Does she want to watch me train? Naruto grinned at her from where he was crouching on the ground. Alright, sure, you can watch me train sometime, Hinata said, her heart leaping to her throat, but you have to do one thing first, Hinata, despite the fact that it doesn't specify whether she likes me or not. What? What is it, and Naruto-kun? She was still blushing, but now she was blushing because, 1, he was holding her chin and, 2, he was staring into her eyes. He didn't realize it, but these two simple things were blurring her vision. Well, first, he said, standing up in front of her, when you talk to me you're going to have to start looking at my face, he said. I like to see my friends' faces when they're talking to me, that way I know they're listening and they can tell if I'm listening, and the other thing is. He stopped and thought, you can call me Naruto, none of this Ikoan stuff, alright? She objected, but he put a finger to her mouth to stop her, and Hinata silently followed his instructions. She was stunned into silence. With his finger still on her lips, he murmured, alright? So how does the day after tomorrow sound? Around noon? She nodded rapidly and quietly, and he removed his hand to stand up straight. Great, I'll come by then, it's a date, he called back to her as he ran off, waving to her behind him. Little did she know it, she was also waving. This is great because I get to help Hinata get over her shell, and maybe I'll learn more about her. If I get to know her better, well, maybe I'll find out if this is an obsession or something more. She is pretty cute, though. Before long, he was out of her line of sight, and Hinata felt her knees give way beneath her, landing on the floor in the entryway with a thump. I have a date with Naruto-kun? Hinata was shocked by what had just happened. He was scheduled to visit the day after tomorrow, and she would be able to watch him train. She had watched him previously, but she never really asked if it was okay, and he never mentioned anything because he didn't see her. There was something about Naruto's determination that drew her to him. It's the determination I lack. I'm going to do something to show Naruto-kun that I'm not so weak and can be more outgoing, but how? How can I help? Hinata had been doing that a lot lately, so she thought to herself, maybe I'll ask Kiba-kun and Shino-kun for some advice. She had to use the doorway to pull herself up before returning home with strained muscles and joints. I'll speak with them tomorrow, and the day after that, I'll see Naruto once more. She blushed nervously as she went about her regular routine. I just received a date invitation from a girl, and Naruto was on the verge of getting home when he suddenly realized what he had done. Practically speaking, I agreed. However, he was unaware that he had never actually done that with a girl before. Why does it take me so long to take note of these things? Before Sasuke departed, he had indeed shared ramen with Sakura and the gang, but he had never actually eaten with anybody else. He asked himself, I've never been on a date, so how am I supposed to treat a girl? Who could advise him on this? Has anyone ever gone on a date? I hope they have some good info. I don't want to completely embarrass myself, he said, considering that Jiraiya had already left the hamlet and that the only people he could properly ask about women would be Sakura or Kakashi. After that, Naruto went out into the village and spent the majority of the day running around in search of Kakashi. He was unable to locate him, presumably because he was on a mission, and he didn't want to disturb Sakura unless she wasn't conducting errands for the fifth. He was searching for Sakura when he met Lee in the middle of the afternoon near the Hokage Tower. Lee wanted to run around Konoha for a while and begged Naruto to accompany him when Tenten angrily refused. Of course, why not? They ran about Konoha more than a dozen times, and they rested by a river for a while, but not because they were exhausted, but rather because they were bored. Naruto decided to ask Lee a question when they had finished drinking at the river. Fuzzy Brows, what would you do if Sakura-chan asked you on a date? I'd probably take her somewhere to eat, or we'd go somewhere she liked, anything that made Sakura-san happy, Lee said, a little flushed but determined to respond no matter what. Naruto merely nodded. After she watches me train, we might go dine, then we might spend some time by the river gazing at the stars. I would then drive her home, and then what? Is that it? Lee inquired interestedly, perhaps a little enviously, Naruto-san, did Sakura-san ask you on a date? Naruto just replied, oh, no, not Sakura-chan, as he glanced at the river and noticed a fish leaping out and then back in. Fish have it easy, lucky. Lee was more astute than he appeared, and Naruto only nodded in response to his query. Lee then asked who it was, and Naruto remained silent for a while. So, someone else then? Lee asked. It was. Naruto hesitated for a second, and he wasn't sure if he should tell anyone. It's not a big deal, it's just a date, with a friend, who has probably liked me since she was little. It's Hinata, he said, and Lee's jaw dropped as Naruto had anticipated. There was a long period of silence, and he could hear the cicadas coming out. He would have to speak to Sakura tomorrow, and soon it would be too dark to remain out. Lee got up and stretched his legs. Well, Naruto-san, all I can say is be careful. Why would I need to exercise caution? Naruto asked, looking up. Lee clarified a bit more, so it must have been clear that he was confused. Lee ran off toward the village, saying, From what I've seen of Hinata-san, she's shy, you'll have to be careful not to scare her with your loud personality. I get the feeling she's not very strong emotionally. Well, see you Naruto-san. Would he tell anyone back there? Most likely not. Naruto lingered at the river and gazed at the stars for a while until a star fell, just as he was ready to get up. Cast a wish. After a moment of reflection, Naruto said, I hope Hinata enjoys our date. Sakura shouted, What? What do you do on a date? Loud enough for some of the villagers to hear. In an attempt to ignore the pink-haired girl, many continued about their jobs. Why in the world would you ask me that? She whispered. Well, I figured you, being a girl, would know about that kind of stuff, said Naruto somewhat insensitively. You've probably had a few dates while I was gone training with Ero-sennin, right? I meant to ask why you were asking, not why you were asking me, and Sakura was a little annoyed. Never in my life have I gone on a date. I won't tell him that, though. Let's see what my ideal date might entail. I wish I could have a normal date. Sakura tried to seem calm. I think you'd go do something fun, like walk through the village chatting, and then maybe some dinner. I guess then I'd be taken home by my date. Maybe get a gift or a kiss. I guess that's how a normal date would go, she said. It's not like I'm asking for much, really. Sakura's inner self strikes out at the vastness of her imagination, saying, It's unfair. 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 Sakura suddenly had an idea. Why did you ask? No reason. No reason at all. Thanks, Sakura-chan. Naruto said, looking apprehensive and drenched in perspiration. He fled as quickly as he could, unwilling to stay and face her anger. She gave him a look that said, What the hell? Naruto was thinking a lot about his date for tomorrow. What about anything enjoyable? This is also what Fuzzy Brows stated. She wants to watch me train, so I suppose she would find it intriguing if she asked for it. I'm not sure what kind of cuisine she enjoys, but if she enjoys ramen, I could take her to a chiraku. What about a gift? What should I get her, I wonder? Hinata was just finishing her lunch in another area of the village when she spotted a giant spider while washing her dishes. Although she knew it was poisonous, she didn't freak out. Instead, she grabbed one of her larger empty containers and scooped it into it, saying, "I don't need that running around. Maybe Shino-kun would want it for his collection." She covered it with a clear top. "I'll give it to him when I ask him and Kiba-kun about dates. I'm sure one of them has been on at least one," she said, tying the container in her pocket before hurriedly cleaning her crockery, grabbing a dog biscuit, and running out the door. Today and tomorrow are training-free days. I'm fortunate that Nissan has a mission on the 5th. You should practice on your own while I'm gone. When she whispered, I'd never be able to concentrate with my date with Naruto-kun on my mind. Hinata found Shino easily because he was always gathering bugs when he had nothing better to do. She found Shino close to the edge of some woods, and when he saw her coming, he turned to face her but remained silent. When she said, "Good afternoon, Shino-kun," Shino nodded his head in agreement. She was going to ask him where Kiba was when he landed next to her, which momentarily startled her but didn't upset her too much. "What's up, Hinata?" Kiba said. Akamaru was relaxing on his head, and the dog yawned and simply laid there happily. Hinata slightly shifted to the side. Both ninjas simply stared at Hinata as she fidgeted. Well, I thought I'd ask you, for some advice," yet a tiny smile never left her face. Kiba nodded and she asked her query. "Do you know what you're supposed to do on a date?" He looked to Shino for assistance, but he was already picking up a bug a few feet away, and when he turned back to Hinata, he was at a loss for words. There was an awkward silence in the air as they were struck by her question. It was clearly evident that neither of them had ever gone on a date before. Shino turned away knowing he could not possibly offer any advice. Shino returned to the conversation but remained silent, and Hinata waited patiently for an answer. Well, no one's ever asked, pust. Shino, some help here?" Kiba implied that he was at a loss for words. I think if I went on a date with someone, I'd like a picnic or something. I'd probably get her a gift or something, maybe get a gift in return if she liked me," Kiba said, struggling to talk about a subject he found difficult to understand. Kiba wondered inwardly why she would ask guys for advice like this and not girls like Ino or Ten. Hinata spoke aloud, "A gift? Perhaps I ought to purchase Naruto something. What do men like? What kinds of presents do men prefer to receive? What's the best present you've ever received, Kiba-kun? Shino-kun?" He halted and glanced up, saying, Akamaru I guess, and both of them stared at Shino for a while, waiting for an answer because the question was aimed at him as well. Shino remained silent for a full minute, even though it seemed longer, and they both heard him inhale. "I like bugs," Shino said simply. Hinata and Kiba were both a little let down but unsurprised because bugs were the Oburain clan's specialty. Kiba shook his head and turned to face Hinata. A little worried, Kiba inquired, "Why did you want to know about a date, Hinata? Is someone bothering you about it? If so, don't let them bother you." Hinata went to depart, but she stopped a few steps away before she could say, "It's nothing like that, but thank you, I think I feel a little better now, bye." They both wondered if she had missed something, so she ran back to them and started searching through her pockets. She passed the jar containing the spider to Shino and the dog biscuit to Kiba. When Akamaru scented the treat, his head pricked up. "You can give that to Akamaru," she said, turning to Shino. "I found that in my kitchen. I thought maybe you might want it," she said. As Shino eyed the spider, which was larger than the one he already had. Kiba swiftly handed the treat over after turning it over a few times in his hands and sensing that Akamaru would harm him shortly if he didn't. An excellent specimen, Domo, good, I'm glad you like it, well, see you, and thanks again, Hinata said as she hurried away. Kiba shouted out to her once more, wondering why she needed their help. She turned and grinned broadly, saying, tomorrow, I have a date with Naruto-kun, and then she was gone. After putting the spider he had brought in a jar to capture bugs, Shino moved closer. For a time, everything was quiet, and Akamaru could be heard eating on the treat she had brought him. Kiba sat on the ground and watched his dog eat, patting it on the head. You all right? Shino questioned. When a lengthy pause, Kiba took up his dog and put him on his lap to sleep when Akamaru finished eating. She's going on a date with Naruto, Shino said. Kiba looked down in despair, but he couldn't figure out why. He could always tell that she liked Naruto, and aside from Naruto, it wasn't very clear. It's okay, it's just a crush, I hope, Kiba said. Men enjoy eating, so perhaps I should make a lunch for us to eat after I watch him exercise. I should also purchase him a gift, Hinata thought as she hurried home. What should I get, I wonder? I might prepare more of the ointment for him and wrap it as well. With a delighted smile on her face, Hinata sprinted the entire way home after blushing at his response to her present. Even though Naruto was eating by himself at home and sipping some instant ramen, he continued to smile. At the same time, Naruto and Hinata were thinking, I am so excited for tomorrow. Hinata was bustling around the kitchen on the day she finally went on a date with Naruto. She had prepared some onigiri and was working on other treats for their meal. Since all she had ever seen Naruto eat was ramen, Hinata was a little concerned about whether or not he would enjoy it. She tried the miso soup before putting it in a thermos, and it tasted good. The meal was almost finished, and she said, I hope Naruto-kun enjoys it. Naruto had been quite excited about his date the night before, but as he approached the Hyuga estate, he started to feel a little anxious. He had hardly slept the night before and was still unsure of what to give her. He had his arms crossed and his face in a kind of frown when Ino stopped him as he was about to pass the flower shop. What's wrong with you? She said, you look kinda weird today. Well, not that you don't look weird every day, but today you look extra weird. He blinked and pointed to himself to see if she was speaking to him. She nodded, but he had no idea what she was talking about. Naruto entered the store. You wouldn't understand, it's complicated, I have to get a gift for Dash, he said, shaking his head. Sakura? It's not her birthday or anything, why would Ino attempted to repeat? He hesitated to respond, saying, it's not for Sakura, it's for. It wasn't Ino's business. Another girl, I have a date with her, Ino said, laughing uncontrollably. Naruto on a date seemed almost impossible. She repeatedly slapped his shoulder before stopping when he didn't laugh, then she looked at his face. Oh, you meant it? Ino stared, and she retreated from him as he nodded. He explained that he was uncomfortable and unsure of what to get her, and he tried his best to keep it a secret, just that she was cute. Ino nodded as she processed all the details he was prepared to share. Well, it's clear what you ought to provide her. You must have met me today by accident. Ino had her hands on her hips, she stared down his disbelieving face. Ino signaled with her hand at the room, she waved to all the things around her, some flowers you dolt. When he didn't understand, she screamed, and his expression eventually conveyed that he did. Oh! What a fantastic idea! Naruto yelled, and Ino's pride rose as he acknowledged her brilliance. She showed him several bouquets, but nothing seemed to fit Hinata. He didn't want to get anything large, but he couldn't find anything small that would work either. As Ino was growing impatient, Naruto's gaze fell on a white flower. "Which one is it?" Ino's gaze strayed to it as he pointed to it. "That's a white gardenia, we have yellow ones too, their meaning is some ties to love and such, they're sort of popular, the roses do better." Ino chose one of the healthiest looking flowers and cut off the stem, wrapping the end with a tiny moist cloth before giving it to him. "I'll take one of those," she said, because something about the flower was ideal for Hinata and would look fantastic in her hair as well. "There you have it." He was going to withdraw some cash from his frog bag, but Ino reassured him that it was only a single flower. He thanked her and proceeded to walk to Hinata's house, pausing briefly to consider his date before returning to his work. Arriving at Hinata's house a little after noon, Naruto felt extremely fortunate to have found Ino at that time because he wouldn't have a present for her otherwise. A Hyuga estate servant answered the door, and Naruto concealed the flower behind his back. The woman led the way to the kitchen and said, "Naruto-san, Hinata-sama is in the kitchen, please come in." He soon saw Hinata, who was humming and had her back to him. She was wearing an apron and was likely cooking something. "I suppose the Byakugan is useless if she isn't paying attention." The servant bowed and left the room shortly after. "Hi, Hinata." Instead of merely showing up behind her, he thought it would be better to let her know he was here. She jumped nonetheless and turned around, but her apron had flowers printed on it. Perhaps the flower was a better idea than he had initially thought. Her head immediately dipped down, and her cheeks flushed crimson red. "Naruto-kun. I should have been at the front to welcome you, but I'm sorry. I apologize to Nisan, but I should have been training more." "Why didn't I realize he was standing there?" she mumbled. It took all of her strength to keep her knees from giving out when Naruto sounded reprimanding. "I told you that you should look in a person's face when talking to them, and didn't I say enough with the Akuen stuff?" "Hinata," Naruto said, taking a few steps toward her and raising her head once more to look up, unaware that he was invading her personal space. Her heart skipped a beat. She gulped and nodded. When she informed him it was for them to eat later, he was astonished and amazed by her planning skills. "She's actually extremely thoughtful." He backed away and cleared his throat. He was looking around her at the big bento that was wrapped in fabric. "I have something for you, but you have to close your eyes," Naruto said gravely as he looked directly into her eyes. "Close my eyes?" Even though Hinata was anxious, she closed them nonetheless. Naruto blushed as she closed her eyes, and he grinned while placing something in her hair behind her ear. "There," she said, opening her eyes to discover a stunning white flower behind her ear. She exclaimed, "And Naruto-kun," his words, "I think it looks great on you, very cute with your long hair," caused her face to heat up. "I don't think I can do this," she said. "Naruto-kun has been really nice to me." Hinata was unaware that Naruto had questioned her, but he repeated, "I don't know how long I can stay like this without losing consciousness." "Ready to go? I can show you where I train and then you can see some of my cool techniques." He suddenly grabbed her hand and they ran, passing over fence posts and rooftops. Hinata couldn't believe she was actually holding Naruto's hand, or rather, he was holding hers, and she had to use her other hand to keep the flower he gave her from falling loose in her hair. "This is incredible." She nodded as she picked up the bento, placed it in a shoulder bag, and led the way out of her house. He released her hand, and for a brief moment, she was disappointed, wishing she could have held it longer. They eventually landed in a small clearing on the outskirts of the village, and Hinata could hear a river nearby. She noticed that many trees had been toppled by tremendous force, which was odd because she couldn't recall anything about a recent storm. "This is my training ground. I sort of made it when I got back with Arosenin. If you want, you can sit over there under that tree. It's got a lot of shade and it's pretty close to the little stream. He continued to stretch prior to doing anything. As soon as he turned around, Hinata embraced the jacket, saying, "It smells like ramen noodles and sweat. That's okay, somehow it suits him." She stopped hugging it and just placed it on her lap, and while it was there, she slipped the ointment she'd wrapped into his pocket. "I don't have the courage to give it to him face to face," Hinata said, observing him warm up under the tree. He removed his jacket to reveal a black t-shirt. Before beginning a jutsu, Naruto performed a few hops and made a well-known gesture with his hands together. He then performed a few more stretches because taking off his jacket made it a little less confining. He made about 10 copies and started sparring with them, saying, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." He would kick them into trees and use kunai to destroy them, and he would throw quick punches and kicks that knocked many of them out before they vanished into a puff of smoke. This continued for well over an hour, but Hinata never took her eyes off of him, and Naruto could sense it. He was not working that hard, so it must have been the sun. It was actually cool where she was sitting, so the heat didn't bother her. Hinata would stare at his face while he trained. He always seemed serious when he fought, and she could see sweat trickling down his neck and glistening on his forehead. He threw shuriken and kunai with speed and accuracy, and despite his perspiration, Hinata couldn't help but think he was handsome. He walked up a tree and made a target with his kunai after they had been sparring for a while. He then jumped down and began throwing kunai at the target, making them hit in a perfect circle. He also threw a few shuriken that hit the center. Hinata was inspired by his resolve and determination, and she found herself wishing she could fight with him, not to beat him, but to gain strength for doing so. Naruto sensed her need to fight, so he decided to try inviting her to join him. "It's time for some confidence boosting." She was surprised by his offer and attempted to refuse, but Naruto persisted and even went so far as to approach her where she was sitting and assist her in standing up. "If you want, Hinata, you can spar with me, I don't mind," he thought to himself, thinking that perhaps he'd like to test her skills as well. "This will be great, perhaps I can improve her self-assurance." He asked, "You ready?" as he assumed a combat position. She adopted his, but a worried expression remained on her face. He could see she was anxious about facing him. Is she afraid I could harm her? Or that I might get injured by her? Most likely the latter. How can I motivate her to fight harder if she worried that she would hurt him in any way? Naruto created a shadow clone of himself and asked, "How about this, Hinata? If you're afraid of hurting me, you can fight my clone, how's that sound?" That shouldn't be too bad, would it? He noticed that she was smiling again. She nodded and assumed her combat position once more. "Since it's not Naruto, I can defeat a clone." He told her that they should eat if she struck the clone hard enough for it to poof. When Hinata began the fight, he dodged and all of her shuriken missed. He also threw some back, but she used her spinning technique, which she had practiced with Niji before, to knock them away. One of them was knocked back at him, but he easily swatted it away. She ran up to him and began using her juken attacks, but all of them were blocked, and she was starting to get a little frustrated. Naruto was on the sidelines, encouraging her. He swung his arms, saying, "I can do it," and exclaimed, "Yay! Go Hinata! Take him out." She allowed him to start punching and kicking her, and she let him chase her for a bit so she could orient herself. She even kicked off from a tree to get farther away. "I need to stop running, but what can I do? He blocks everything, yet perhaps I am aware of it." Hinata used the next tree to leap back towards him, saying, "I can take a hit or two if it means I can deal a tough blow." He was attacking and kicked repeatedly, so she grabbed his leg after taking a kick to her side. She then struck him in the chest, sending him flying several feet before he hit the ground. A little stunned, Hinata turned to Naruto, who had been supporting her. Unable to control her joy, Hinata said, "I did it." Then she watched him disappear into smoke. What? Hinata was momentarily perplexed before realizing, to her horror, what had happened. She turned to face Naruto, who she had thought was a shadow clone, and he pulled himself up and dusted himself off with ease. He was clearly unharmed. Naruto approached Hinata and saw her staring down in embarrassment. "That was awesome, Hinata. You did great. You're a lot stronger than you let on," he said, suddenly feeling awful about the prank he'd pulled on her. He didn't realize it would have hurt her so much. "From what I've seen of Hinata-san, she's shy. You'll have to be careful not to scare her with your loud personality. I get the feeling she's not very strong emotionally." He put his hands on her shoulders and she stopped shaking as he frantically tried to reassure her that he was okay. I'm sorry, Hinata. I didn't mean to trick you, it's just," he said, noticing that she was shaking. "I was just trying to build your confidence a little. I thought that if you thought you were fighting my clone you wouldn't hold back, so that when you found out you were actually fighting me you'd feel like you accomplished something by trying your hardest," he said without looking up. "I can't hear you, Hinata, you need to look up," he said, and when she did, he saw that her face was filled with anxiety. I must have truly frightened her, because Naruto felt awful. "So, you're not hurt?" she asked, shivering once more, but Naruto couldn't tell if it was from the fear she had just experienced or the anxiety of seeing his face. "She was clearly afraid about injuring me, so I suppose it was a stupid prank to pull on her." He grinned and patted her head. "Nope." Naruto led her back to the tree's shade, where his jacket and the bento were. Her face seemed to calm down a little as they sat down, and when they opened the bento, they discovered a delicious feast. They ate onigiri and sushi rolls that she had made, and he told her that everything was great. He particularly enjoyed the pickled plum and the onigiri, and the miso soup was delicious. Hinata finished before him because she didn't eat as much as he did, and the wind was blowing now. Naruto casually remarked that it couldn't have been windy while he was training, and that the breeze would have felt wonderful. Hinata gazed out into the forest, amazed at how different she felt, and she wanted to tell him about Naruto-kun. I think I heard "kun" again. Hinata couldn't finish because she didn't really want to. "For the longest time I admired you, I enjoyed just observing you from a distance, and I always believed that you were out of reach since I was so." As he consumed another sushi roll, Naruto attempted to complete the sentence, "because you were shy?" "Quiet. Unnoticeable," she said with her head lowered and turned away. He noticed that her face was terribly dejected. "I used to watch you train occasionally when we were at the Ninja Academy, but I'd never join you or talk to you because I was afraid you would just ignore me," she said, her eyes welling with tears. He reached out to wipe a tear that was starting to roll down her cheek, but she got there first. He pulled his hand back a little, thinking, "I want to comfort her, but..." Naruto felt a terrible agony in his stomach, but I had no idea. She had been pleading with me to see her for years, but I was too blind to notice. She was stuttering, I won't ever be as strong as Dash," when he pulled her to him and put her head to his shirt. "USC? Even and now I'm being weak," she said, but before she could finish, he pulled her to him and put her head to his shirt. The abrupt circumstance overwhelmed Hinata, and she was unable to speak. "Why is he?" She cautiously raised a hand and took hold of his shirt, saying, "You don't have to be as strong as anyone, you're not weak. If you want you can cry on my shirt, I don't have a tissue or anything." "Is this real?" Hinata hiccuped and sniffed as she sobbed in his shirt. He hugged her tightly and didn't let go once. She just ever wanted me to see her, she didn't want to be invisible. The flower he put in her hair gave off a lovely perfume. Hinata had calmed down and was starting to feel a little better after a few minutes, but she still kept hiccuping. Naruto-kun hugged me, he didn't push me away or ignore me, but he's still holding me right now. Is it because he feels sorry for me? She leaned on his chest and rested her head. She had exhausted herself with all of her anxiety since this morning, and it finally took its toll on her after she sobbed. It didn't take long for her to fall asleep. Naruto noticed that she had fallen asleep but did nothing to stop her. He reached for his jacket and draped it over her. She was still holding tightly to his shirt and could smell his sweat. She didn't mind at all. It doesn't matter why, it just means he's being kind. He laughed and said, Hinata, you're something else. I didn't think I could like anyone but Sakura-chan. Naruto brushed some of Hinata's soft, light hair out of her face and tucked it behind her ear. Maybe I could like her, but I guess it's still too early to tell. He was going to stay up and let her sleep, but he was exhausted from his sleepless night the night before and all the training, so it didn't take long for him to fall asleep as well. He was still holding her close as if he was afraid to let go, and she was clutching him. It seemed as though they were both sleeping comfortably while the leaves were being scattered by the wind. Lee arrived on the scene a little later than expected and was a little taken aback. He left the sleeping couple alone by simply walking away without waking them. Hinata woke up just before sundown. She felt as though she was wrapped in a blanket and saw black fabric when she first opened her eyes. She tried to find out where she was without moving. When did I fall asleep? Why do I hear a heartbeat? She was watching Naruto-kun train, and then we ate, and then she remembered that she had confessed to him that she liked him and then that she had been crying all over his shirt. She wanted to sit up, but she was restrained by someone's arms, and when she craned her head to look up, she saw Naruto's sleeping face tilted down as if he was watching her rest. He was obviously asleep, and Hinata was clearly about to faint. And Naruto-kun, she cried in a desperate voice, but he didn't move. She freed a hand and attempted to shake his shoulder, but he didn't wake up. He slept so soundly that Hinata gave up. Her cheeks were still pink, but they had lightened. She took a deep breath to calm herself and stared at his face, noting that he had a tan, albeit a slight one, and those lines, which she traced with her finger, remind me of cats. When she traced another one, she whispered, You look like a cat, Naruto-kun, you have whiskers too. When Naruto started to stir, Hinata quickly withdrew her hand, saying, Sorry, Naruto-kun, I was just dashed. She bowed her head down and realized it was a fatal error. Her face was now against his chest, and when she realized, Hinata pushed herself away from Naruto and his hold with adrenaline. Hinata? Naruto asked, rubbing his eyes as he looked at her worriedly. Feeling better? I guess you were tired after crying, that's why you fell asleep, he said. What is she freaking out for? Hinata's mind was racing with all sorts of ideas as she searched for an explanation for why Naruto had gripped her so tightly. I was crying uncontrollably. That's most likely the case. He was consoling me as a buddy, correct? You mean he's simply a friend? Naruto was staring at her while she was lost in concentration, acting agitated. It's kind of inevitable that she would apologize for being ditzy and then again. Hinata was going nuts, and I also fell asleep on Naruto-kun. I'm really sorry, Naruto-kun. I'm really sorry for crying on you and falling asleep on you, I never meant to. Then, when she woke up, she recalled hearing his heartbeat and feeling his muscles through the clothing. Hinata blushed as she considered the chest behind the clothing, nearly passing out in her head. I need to calm down. Ah, I know. She needs something to distract her from this whole I'm weak and I'm sorry thing. She apologizes too much. He scooted a little closer to her and, without realizing it, two of his fingers touched hers. Hinata's breath caught and she turned to see Naruto, but he was staring at the sunset rather than their hands. "Looks great, right?" Hinata said, jolting her out of her reverie as she saw him pointing to the sunset behind her. It was a mixture of red and orange hues, and the yellow sun was nearly gone. "Yes, it's beautiful," Hinata said, turning to face the sun and grinning as she felt his few fingers lightly brush against hers. Even after the sun had set, the two remained there for a little while longer. Hinata was thinking about how fortunate she was to have spent time with Naruto, who had given her a flower and lunch, comforted her when she cried, and even held her while she slept. The wind was blowing, the birds had gone to their nests for the night, and the nighttime bugs were starting their chorus. Suddenly, Naruto inquired, "Hinata, do you like ramen?" I forgot that he is completely unpredictable as well. I guess I haven't really eaten a lot of ramen. Hinata trailed off, but she didn't want to come across as impolite. "This is my opportunity to learn more about Naruto-kun," she said loudly, "but I'd really like to try some though." "That's great." He helped her put everything away and pick up her bento. "Hopefully, this will give me the opportunity to help her open up more." He stood up and offered to help her up. She took it slowly and got up, but he put his jacket on her shoulders instead. "Since you made lunch, I'll take you to dinner." "I don't have a lot of money, but I'm sure I have enough for a chiraku. Come on," he said, taking her hand and guiding her back to the village. There was a positive vibe to being led around by Naruto, as if he was there to help her if she needed him. "This is fantastic." They arrived at the ramen shop, and Naruto greeted the owner's daughter with his usual loud voice. "Hinata is very nice. She said she'll try ramen. I've ignored her for a long time, but now I feel like sharing things with her, and I like comforting her, too." He remembered holding her close and the smell of the gardenia he got her. She was behind him and couldn't see, but a little flush came to his face. He thought that holding her hand at the moment had a pleasant feeling as well. "Hey, Naruto. Here for more ramen?" "Ha? Who's this?" Hinata bowed and said, "I'm Hyuga Hinata. It's nice to meet you." "She's so cute, Naruto. And polite too. Is she your girlfriend? Is she your girlfriend? Is she your girlfriend? Is she your girlfriend?" There was a little uneasy pause as the question seemed to reverberate throughout the store. Hinata and Naruto felt burdened by the question. His girlfriend? My girlfriend? They allowed the question to creep into their thoughts, and both of them experienced a wave of discomfort. Hinata blushed profusely and Naruto felt extremely self-conscious, with a faint pink tint on his face, but they both spoke up at once. Neither of them was able to look at the other at the time. It's not like that. We're just. Does it truly appear like we're dating? Really dating, I mean? We came to eat some ramen for dinner. Hinata hasn't really eaten it much before, so I thought I'd take her to the best ramen shop in the village. Naruto coughed to break the silence. "Oh, Naruto, you flatter us," she said as she hurried off to make 2 bowls of beef ramen. Naruto sat down, but Hinata hung back. To be Naruto-kun's girlfriend, that would be. Hinata's thoughts abruptly drifted to kissing, and her face flushed. Why did my mind go to that? I just considered giving Naruto-kun a kiss. When Naruto called her name and motioned for her to sit down, the seats were the same as previously. With his lips so close to her ear, Naruto made her uneasy. Does he understand the concept of personal space? Don't let what she said bother you, he whispered in her ear. The woman hummed as she brought the bowls over, then chuckled because she had forgotten the chopsticks and had to go hunt for them. She knows girls don't usually hang out with me, that's why she's so nosy, she said, staring at Hinata as she attempted to talk. Naruto froze, knowing that he had been discovered. Naruto-kun, is this your first date? She asked. He turned slowly, trying to conceal his embarrassment with a silly smile. Without really expecting a response, he questioned, is it that obvious? Sorry, if it's not very Naruto grimaced and turned his head away. It's mine too, she said, gazing calmly into her tea. I asked my team for some advice on it, but I don't think they'd been on one either. Doesn't it seem familiar? He remembered asking Sakura and Lee for recommendations, and when Hinata spoke again, he turned back to her. She smiled at her reflection in her tea and said, I always thought speaking to you was impossible for me, but I'm here, eating dinner with you. I think I've gotten a little stronger, while Naruto looked at her and thought he'd like to see her smile more frequently. Just as Naruto was about to touch her shoulder, Ayam, the ramen girl, brought the chopsticks and apologized for not finding them earlier. Right, ramen, Hinata imitated Naruto's actions after he had some first. She discovered that the ramen wasn't all that horrible and that she actually liked it, especially the meat and vegetables, which she preferred above the noodles. Despite her intense enjoyment, she was unable to finish the full bowl. Are you done, Hinata? Naruto handed Ayam his chopsticks and empty bowl. She believed he was going to give it to Ayam, but instead he took her chopsticks to eat what was left. She felt uncomfortable watching him. Yes, I don't think I can eat any more of it, sorry. He shrugged it off and reached for her bowl. Does he not have a problem eating after me? That must also be extremely Naruto. He finished the ramen and gave Ayam the bowl. He paid for their meals, and just as they were ready to go, Ayam called out to them. You're not going to have another bowl, Naruto? I thought you usually ate 2 or 3. I don't want Hinata to think I'm a pig, but even though Naruto didn't turn back, Hinata could see he was a little embarrassed. It took him a moment to figure out why. I also wish to use some of my money for other purposes. He informed her that he had eaten a large lunch and had hurried away. Geez, that woman is so annoying. Naruto approached Hinata, who was still wearing his coat. He went on a tirade about how it was his own business how much he ate, and Hinata tried desperately to think of a way to casually hold his hand again. She enjoyed it when he led her around the village, but she was about to reach for it before she pulled back. Unbeknownst to her, Naruto had gone to a nearby stall and was conversing with someone behind it. She felt like she was being bothersome, as if she was being a burden to Naruto, and he was growing bored with his date. Perhaps I should just go home. He smiled, dessert, and gave her some cherry-flavored shaved ice along with a small spoon. Her face flushed pink as she thanked him for the treat, but Hinata saw that there was only one. I don't usually eat sweets and stuff, she said, but the truth is I don't have enough to buy two. I need to do some work to restock my frog. As they were walking, Hinata used the little spoon to eat the ice. Naruto kept looking at her dessert, saying, "It looks really good." He was a little disappointed in himself, saying, "I'm such a glutton, all I ever think about is food." Hinata saw him looking at it twice and decided to share it with him because, after all, he had previously eaten after her without any issues and had paid for it himself. She offered him her cherry ice, but she had already consumed half of it, so he could have the rest. She is really kind to everyone. He thanked her and ate a few spoonfuls before returning it. She just stared at it for a while. Naruto may not mind eating after others, but it still bothered Hinata a little. You can have the rest, Naruto-kun, you paid for it after all, he said, taking it in his hand and looking down at it. It will be like an indirect kiss. He could see her staring at the ice, but she didn't appear to hear him. "Hey, Hinata, if you don't eat it, it will melt," he said. "Is she scared to eat after me? What are we, 5? Come on. See, Hinata?" "It's no big deal," he said, scooping and eating a spoonful of ice before digging out more and placing it next to her mouth. Hinata swallowed the ice without knowing how to respond, but she glanced at Naruto with a scarlet face. He mocked her, saying, "You can do it yourself, or do I have to feed you?" He was joking, but she took it seriously and found it quite embarrassing. Hinata grabbed the spoon away from him and rapidly consumed the remaining ice while wearing a scarlet face. "I can't believe he did that. However, he is correct, it shouldn't be a huge deal wrong. We shouldn't be eating one other's food because we're not boyfriend and girlfriend." It's sort of sweet how she's always bashful and blushes a lot. Naruto could see in her expression that he could have scared her away. Perhaps I shouldn't have joked like that to her, but she did eat it, so perhaps she wasn't too offended. He sighed as he watched her finish the ice. Naruto held his hands behind his head, saying, "Hinata, tell me more about yourself. You never seem to talk about you, just everyone else." They continued to walk toward Hinata's house. No one had actually asked her before, and now that she thought about it, she wouldn't know what to say if someone did. "I don't really know what to say about myself," she admitted. He was attempting to persuade her to loosen up and be a little more social, so he asked, "How about your hobbies? Or what you've been up to with your training?" When he brought up training, she said, "Oh, a topic she can talk about?" She looked down at the dirt on the path they were walking on and said, "I have been learning a lot from Nisan. I hope that I'll get stronger so that my father will praise me. Niji and I-san says I have a long ways to go, he's much stronger than I am." Hinata was smiling, but her eyes were sad. She tries really hard to be noticed, not just by me, but also by her family. I can't really imagine that kind of pressure from your family. I managed to almost land a hit on him the other day. It gave him a scratch, but I don't think he noticed. I'm going to have to work a lot harder so that father can be proud of me and Nisan will start being friendlier, she said. When he looked down at her, it appeared that her smile had faded from when she looked into her drink at the ramen shop. I want her to smile more. Naruto thought he would have to console her or say something amusing to lift her spirits, so he put his hands back down from behind his head and considered holding her hand, but he didn't reach for it. Hinata turned to listen. "Hinata, you're really interesting," she said. "Am I interesting?" When she helped me, he remembered how caring she was about his injury. "You're also the type that cares a lot about what others think of you. You work extra hard. I think that's cool but strange too," he said, smiling a little. "You're the kind of person who would save an abandoned cat. You like helping people," he said. "Why is it weird?" Hinata asked, lowering her head as she felt a little depressed. She thought of all the times she tried to impress Niji with her techniques and all the jutsus she would try to perfect for her father, but they never told her she was good or getting better. "Well," he said, scratching his head, "it's just that you're trying to make everyone happy without getting anything in return. You're trying so hard but they won't even acknowledge that you're even trying. You kind of remind me of me," Naruto said with a sad, distant expression on his face despite his smile. "He's been alone too," Hinata recalled, and she gathered the courage to reach out for his hand. He looked down as usual, but she looked up and smiled out into the distance, and it's the same smile she had at dinner. "No, not really, it's happier than that." Hinata recalled that Naruto always worked hard so that everyone would accept him, so that they'd like him, but nothing ever seemed good enough, just like me. Many parents when they were younger said that we shouldn't talk to Naruto, but they never explained why. "We're two of a kind, Naruto-kun," he gave her a smile, and for the first time, he didn't feel alone. He didn't even chastise her for adding, "You know, she really is sweet, I like her more than I thought." He gave her a small squeeze, and she gave him one in response. He then squeezed my hand. I gave it a squeeze in return. They walked in silence as she leaned closer to him. He wanted to give her a hug when she did, but he decided against it because he didn't want to frighten her with his loud personality. They soon arrived at her house's entrance and were both shocked to learn that their date was over. "What? Is it finished?" Naruto was starting to question whether Hinata's head was permanently bowed. "Thank you very much, Naruto-kun, I had a wonderful time," she said, passing him his jacket. "I got my date with Naruto-kun, so now he's paid me back, and he has no reason to come and see me anymore," Hinata said. "I had a lot of fun too, Hinata," Naruto said. Although he was grinning, he was becoming more depressed as the date's finality set in. "I wish the date had been longer so I could have talked to her more and learned more about her. I'm really glad, I'm glad that I got to spend time with you, good night." She turned around and was ready to enter, but Naruto said, "But I don't want her to go yet." He grasped her jacket sleeve without realizing it. Wait, he wanted to say, but he was at a loss for words. He had only planned to grab her sleeve. Hinata turned around, but she didn't look up. Why had I grabbed her jacket? Is it because of what? She stumbled to say. His face was getting redder as time passed. Well, it's. He said, searching for the right words and gradually coming up with one. "I have something else I want to give you," he said. "I think I really like her, she's so accepting and nice about everything, shy but that's okay, it suits her." "What is it?" Because her face was low and she couldn't see his, Naruto's face turned redder. "Well, you have to, close your eyes," she said, not suspecting him of anything. "Am I getting another flower?" Though she kept her eyes closed, Hinata felt him raise her head from her lowered position. "What's he d-dash?" He then planted a kiss on her lips, causing her eyes to open in astonishment before closing as she embraced him. Their kiss was a simple, inexperienced one, but it was still innocent, and he withdrew his apology, making Naruto feel foolish. He couldn't see her face since she had dropped it again, but he could see that Hinata had put a hand to her mouth, so he said, I am sorry about that, it's just, you were so cute and I made a mistake. I'll understand if you don't want to talk to me again, I really am sorry." Fuzzy Brows warned me to be careful because she wasn't very emotionally strong and I've probably permanently damaged her. I hope she doesn't sick Niji on me, Kiba, Shino, or the entire village, for that matter. She gripped the bottom hem of Naruto's coat just as he was going to leave in embarrassment and shame. When he turned to look behind him, she was standing there. Did she have something to say? Will she eat me up? She said something. No, Hinata wouldn't do that. Hinata gripped his jacket tightly, refusing to let go. I can't hear you, Hinata, you need to dash, would you? Hinata stopped and asked, go on a DD date with me once more, and Naruto-kun, that way I could get another G-gift at the end? She is so adorable that she dropped his jacket and went to her knees while keeping her face hidden. Does this imply that I didn't make a mistake? That she does, in fact, like me? Isn't it an obsession or a crush? I truly want to go on another date with her, and I wouldn't mind going on a few more if it meant getting to know her better, he said, turning to face her and standing for a while. Sure, we can go on another date, but you still have to do something for me. I have to look at you when I'm talking, Hinata said, lifting her face as she brushed away her tears and met his blue eyes. I can't stand, my legs are too weak, he said. You remember the second part? I'm going to add something to it though, Naruto said, lowering himself to the ground level with her face. Hinata had to resist the urge to bow her head. "I want you to call me Naruto and, kiss me," she said, her eyes widening in distress as she considered whether or not she could actually kiss him. Hinata struggled to speak, but I was unable to do so when he was looking directly into my eyes. Hinata attempted to sound confident as she mimicked him earlier. "I will, but you have to close your eyes," she said. He grinned and closed them. Although she had assumed that this method would make things easier, it isn't. Naruto felt a feeling of déjà vu as she hovered close to his face but was unable to bring herself to contact her lips with his. She extended a hand and traced a whisker on his face. She was having problems saying NNN-. How difficult could it be to just say Naruto-kun without the kun? When he saw that she was shaking, he said, "She doesn't have to kiss me, if she can just say my name without the kun attached, then I'll be happy." He raised a hand and placed it on the one she was wearing to his face, and she instantly stopped shaking. "I can do it," he said. "Yes, I will." Naruto, Hinata then pressed her lips to Naruto's, and he was a little taken aback. He didn't think she would have the courage, but he was glad that she did. This kiss felt different from the pathetic attempt he had made just moments before, when he put his hands behind her back to hold her. He could feel her long hair and the warmth of her body, and they broke away from the kiss, but both of them kept their hands where they were. "I didn't think I could, but you see? That wasn't so bad, right?" No, the kiss was fantastic, but Hinata still felt a little uncomfortable about it. She avoided his eyes by pulling the traditional head bow once again. "Oh, no, you don't," he said, lifting one of his hands from her but to raise her gaze again. He released her chin and grinned wryly, saying, "I knew you could say my name, Hinata. I tell you what, how about we go on another date the day after tomorrow? This time, we'll do whatever you want, like go fishing or something." "Whatever you think is fun," he said. As he got up and pulled her up, she smiled and nodded. He gave her the embrace he had been wanting to give her earlier. She wasn't sure what to do at first, so she put her hands up and hugged his center, then sank into his chest and moaned. "Thanks, Hinata," Naruto said after taking a long breath. "For what?" Hinata asked, perplexed. "I'm not sure, I just feel like I should be thanking you," Naruto said, backing off and glancing at Hinata's face. He scratched his neck and grinned awkwardly, and she returned the smile, putting her hands together in front of her, her face still flushed from their kiss. He waved goodbye and said he would see her soon. "Good night, Hinata, sweet dreams," she waved back, grinning a little. "You too, Naruto."